And when you hear about her case, it's really hard to not think about a cold case in Kansas City, also involving a 16-year-old who was raped and murdered. And this is Fawn Cox. There's DNA evidence from her attacker, but no advanced genetic genealogy has taken place yet. Her family is still waiting.
The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Somewhere in Kansas City, there's a photograph. A family dinner, a church pew, a birthday candle caught mid-flicker. Ordinary people, standing close together, the way families do when someone points a camera and says, "Get in." For 31 years, one of the people in that photograph was hiding in plain sight. Not a stranger who slipped through a window in the dark. Not a name on a most wanted list. A cousin. Someone who had eaten at that table. Someone who had sat 2 pews over on a Sunday morning. Someone who, for 3 decades, was allowed to grieve alongside the family of the girl he killed. This is the story of how science reached back across 31 years and pulled a name out of a family tree nobody wanted to look at too closely. Today's case: the murder of Fawn Marie Cox, Kansas City, Missouri, 1989. If you're new here, subscribe and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Let's begin. Fawn Marie Cox was born March 24, 1973, in Kansas City, Missouri. The same year, coincidentally, that Worlds of Fun opened its gates across town. 16 years later, she'd be working behind a register there. She was the eldest of 3 daughters born to Beverly and John Cox, with sisters Felisa and Amber coming after her. Anyone with an older sibling knows the role Fawn stepped into without being asked. The one who goes first, who sets the example, who the younger ones orbit around without quite realizing it. The Cox family lived near East 9th Street and Van Brunt Boulevard, a working-class corner of Kansas City that had seen its share of hardship. 5 years before Fawn's murder, a 20-year-old neighbor named Tracy Snow vanished from the same street and was never found. The community carried that unresolved grief quietly, the way neighborhoods do when they've learned not to expect answers. Fawn's family went to church together every single Sunday, and she went willingly. Not a teenager being dragged along, but someone genuinely rooted in it. Outside of church, she found peace in swimming, one of those small private joys people keep for themselves. She was a junior at Northeast High School, 16 years old, with a job she'd taken on herself as soon as she was old enough. Cashier at Worlds of Fun, bringing money home in a household where every dollar had somewhere to be before it arrived. A school bus driver named Monty Clark, who also drove for the Cox family's church, knew her the way tight-knit communities know their own. Not intimately, but genuinely. That summer, Fawn had just gotten her learner's permit. She was on the edge of the kind of small, enormous freedom that belongs to every 16-year-old about to learn to drive. She never got the chance. Wednesday, July 25th, 1989. Kansas City in late July doesn't cool down, even after dark. Fawn worked her shift at Worlds of Fun until 11 p.m. Her mother, Beverly, drove out to pick her up. An unremarkable act of motherhood that Beverly would end up remembering for the rest of her life, because it was the last time she brought her daughter home. Back at the house, Fawn didn't stay up. She had another shift the next day. She said goodnight, went to her second-floor bedroom, set her alarm, and went to sleep. The rest of the house did the same. Outside, the air conditioning units ran loud enough to blur most other sounds. At some point in the early hours of July 26th, the family dog started barking, agitated, insistent, enough to briefly wake one of Fawn's sisters. The dog was pregnant, so the barking got written off as restlessness. Nobody got up to check. Someone had used a trailer parked near the house to climb to the second floor and enter through Fawn's bedroom window, left open against the heat. Whoever it was knew the property. They knew which window, which room, how to move through that house without triggering anything the family would notice until it was too late. At 9:30 the next morning, Fawn's alarm went off and kept going. Beverly waited for it to stop. It didn't. She and Felisa went upstairs, opened the door, and found her. Fawn Cox had been sexually assaulted and killed in her own bed, while her entire family slept down the hall. Investigators processed the scene and recovered biological evidence: hair, blood, and bodily fluid from the bedding. They also found something that didn't belong to anyone in the household: an old military-style cap, unclaimed, left behind. And evidence suggested the intruder may have entered the adjoining bedroom first, the room where Felisa usually slept, before moving into Fawn's. Within a month, a witness came forward naming 3 teenagers, one of them a classmate of Fawn's at Northeast High. Police moved fast. A search of one suspect's home turned up items connected to the Cox residence. One teenager was charged with first-degree murder, rape, and sodomy, and held in custody for 8 months while the era's DNA testing, which, in 1989, could really only narrow things down to a blood type, nothing close to a genetic fingerprint, came back inconclusive. He was released. Then the witness recanted, admitting the account wasn't true. Every charge collapsed. During that investigation, the accused teens had pointed detectives toward a local street group known as the 9th Street Dog Gang. That lead went nowhere. Kansas City Police Captain Ben Caldwell, who would later oversee the department's cold case section, put it plainly years afterward: whoever came through that window knew exactly which one to pick, and knew how to leave without anyone noticing. Which only makes sense, he said, if the person knew Fawn. Nobody could prove it yet. The case went cold. In the early 2000s, KCPD's cold case unit reopened the file and reached a hard conclusion. The original detectives hadn't missed anything. They'd run down every lead available to them. The only thing that could break this case open now was technology that didn't exist yet. A DNA profile was developed from the 1989 evidence and entered into CODIS, the National Criminal Database. No match. The file went back on the shelf. Here's what needs to be understood about Beverly and John Cox. They never treated their daughter's murder as a closed door. Every time a new forensic technique made headlines, they went back to KCPD and asked the same question: can you use this now? They ran fundraisers, year after year, in a household that didn't have money to spare, because they understood that the technology that might identify their daughter's killer would cost money the department didn't have, and they were prepared to pay for it themselves if that's what it took. They put Fawn's photograph on billboards across Kansas City, again and again, for 3 decades. Felisa Cox, who had heard the dog bark that night and gone back to sleep, carried a different weight: the particular burden of having been there, of one ordinary decision in the dark she'd spend the rest of her life turning over. She became one of the loudest voices demanding the case stay alive. Her younger sister Amber later said, in an interview, that the trauma of it never really left, present tense, ongoing, the way trauma from something like this doesn't dissolve just because years pass. In the summer of 2020, everything changed, for a reason that had nothing to do with Fawn's case at first. On June 29, 2020, a 4-year-old boy named Legend Taliaferro was shot and killed while he slept in his Kansas City home. His death, amid a broader surge in violence that summer, led the Department of Justice to launch Operation Legend, a federal initiative that sent funding and resources into Kansas City to help investigate violent crimes, including cold cases that had stalled for reasons as simple as cost. That funding is what finally cleared the financial wall that had stood in front of Fawn's case for 30 years. The genetic testing Beverly and John had offered to pay for out of pocket, the department couldn't previously afford, was now covered by the FBI. Forensic genetic genealogy testing, the same category of technique that identified the Golden State Killer, Joseph James DeAngelo, in 2018, was applied to the DNA profile sitting in a Kansas City evidence room since 1989. Here's roughly how it works. An unknown DNA profile gets uploaded to genealogical databases, the same public ones people use to trace their ancestry, searching not for an exact match, but for people who share partial genetic overlap. Genealogists use those partial matches to build out a family tree, branch by branch, until the tree narrows down to a name. Within weeks, not years, the tree narrowed all the way down, and when detectives followed it to the end, they found someone who had never been a stranger to this family at all. Donald Cox Jr., Fawn's cousin. approximately 21 years old at the time of the murder, 5 years older than Fawn. He knew the house because he'd been in it countless times. He knew the layout, the yard, which window was Fawn's, that the air conditioning would cover sound. Captain Caldwell's assessment from 1989, that whoever did this had to have known Fawn to pull it off, finally had a name attached to it. And then came the final complication. Donald Cox Jr. was already dead. He'd died in 2006, 14 years before genetic genealogy would ever point to him. A medical examiner investigated his death at the time as suspicious, and ultimately ruled it was not the result of foul play. Multiple news outlets at the time reported the cause as an overdose. But because medical examiners retain biological samples as a matter of standard procedure, a blood sample from that 2006 investigation had been sitting in storage ever since, kept for no reason connected to Fawn at all. In 2020, once genetic genealogy pointed toward him, KCPD's crime lab pulled that retained sample and compared it directly against the DNA profile recovered from Fawn's bedroom in 1989. It was a match. On November 10, 2020, 31 years, 3 months, and 15 days after Fawn Cox was murdered, detectives sat down with Beverly and John Cox and told them the truth. Captain Caldwell said both parents were sad but relieved, and that they had, quietly, sometimes wondered whether this particular cousin might have been responsible. The next day, KCPD announced publicly that the case had been solved. The first murder in department history closed using forensic genetic genealogy. There would be no trial, no sentencing, no moment in a courtroom where Donald Cox Jr. answered for what he did. He'd been dead for 14 years by the time his name was ever spoken in connection to this. Felisa Cox spoke to reporters not long after. "It's a relief. There's closure," she said. "The answers aren't always what we were asking for, but there's closure. That's not the ending anyone wanted, but it's the one they got. And there's something worth sitting with in a family choosing to call that closure anyway, rather than nothing at all." What kept this case unsolved for 31 years wasn't a lack of evidence. The evidence was sitting in a Kansas City lab the entire time. What kept it unsolved was a technology that didn't exist yet, and, for years after it did exist, a cost the department couldn't cover without a federal program built in memory of an unrelated 4-year-old boy killed in his sleep, 60 miles and 31 years away from a girl who died the same way, at home, in bed, safe in every way that should have mattered. Fawn Marie Cox was 16. She had a job, a learner's permit, a Sunday pew she sat in without being told to. Her parents spent 3 decades making sure the world didn't get to forget her name before they got an answer. That is the story of Fawn Marie Cox. If you're not subscribed to Black Docket, that story stops with you right now. Hit subscribe and help make sure the next family waiting 30 years for an answer gets one. Thank you for watching. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from